but I was talking about my mother. After Jamie's death, not right away, but gradually, my mom became more and more withdrawn. She didn't have a job and never learned to drive, but she used to go shopping with my father, or went with us on day trips to visit relatives in Silver Spring or Tacoma Park. She also maintained a small garden out front and played bridge twice a week with the neighboring housewives. After the tragedy, she told Dad she didn't feel like talking with family about Jamie, not for a while at least, and somehow that ended her drives to the grocery store as well. The bridge game slipped to once a week, and then just the gardening, and then not even that. Agoraphobia roughly translates to fear of open spaces, but that's not exactly right. It's a kind of depression that, in my mother's case at least, was more about avoiding interactions with other people. Dad and Pam and I were the notable exceptions. She didn't want to see anyone else, and she didn't want anybody else looking in, which explained why she lowered the living room shades, even during the middle of the day. Eventually, she refused to leave the house for any reason, certainly not for the psychiatrist visits that probably would have helped her. More often than that, it was us kids. I'm skipping a little part where it talks about sort of leaning on the father, but more often than my dad helping out, it was us kids doing things for her. Mom spent most of her time on the sofa, to the point that it was hard for me to recall her in motion. Certainly she must have moved from the bedroom to the living room on occasion, definitely needed to use the bathroom like the rest of us, but mostly things were brought to her. A cup of water with ice and a bendable straw, Diet Red Cola in the tall glass bottle, 2 peanut butter and banana sandwiches for lunch, the crust removed, and a small plate of Oreo cookies with a mug of milk for her afternoon snack. She had a remote for the television, but mostly watched the soaps and local news on Channel 9, and if either Pam or I were passing nearby when she wanted to switch, she'd have us change the channel. Mom's other entertainment was newspapers, with a special fondness for the crossword puzzle and the word jumble. She stored the day's puzzle folded over like a napkin on her TV tray next to a plate of food and worked during the commercials or during an especially slow-moving plot on As the World Turns on the Edge of Night. Some days she didn't finish the puzzles or didn't skim her way through the rest of the newspaper sections. Stacks of newspaper piled next to her beside the sofa, beneath the TV tray and at her feet. Mom could never keep straight which stack was the most current, so when Pam asked for today's sports page or I wanted to read the comics, we each had to choose a pile to sort through. Dad taught summer courses. Even between terms, he went to school on a 9 to 4 schedule and used their shop equipment for woodworking and projects he solicited via purple mimeographed ads stapled to telephone poles throughout our neighborhood. All for the extra money, of course, but just as likely because the day-dark house bothered him in ways it wouldn't bother little kids who didn't know much better. At least not usually. But that overcast, rainy day when Mom told us about the dope fiends, the bleak, shadowy living room gave her words the chilly certainty of a midnight whispered campfire ghost story. The police found needles in the woods, Mom said. We stood next to the couch and Mom sat up, a striking change from her usual horizontal posture. Just thrown on the ground where kids like you could step on them in your bare feet. They found rubber tubing also. These dope fiends tie tubes around their arms to make the veins stand out, then use the needles to inject drugs into their bloodstream. She lifted her crossword puzzle pencil and mimed jabbing it into her forearm. Due to my twice-yearly doctor visits, I was already plenty scared of needles. I never escaped without some vaccination or another, for German measles, smallpox, tetanus, whatever. After losing Jamie, Mom wasn't taking chances with me or Pam. I hated the awful tension when the nurse squirted a faint arc of fluid over the sink before she plunged the stinging needle beneath my rolled-up sleeve. The needle was too long and thin. I worried it could snap off inside my arm and hurt forever. The idea of tying a tube around your arm sounded so complex and painful to me. Who would do something like this on purpose? Fiends, of course. A much better word than addict for kids. The word addict scares adults because it's all about loss of control. Our fears that we drink or gamble or screw against logic, throw money we didn't have into greedily programmed machines, or wake up late mornings with a monstrous hangover and an even more monstrous bedroom companion. Kids don't fear addiction. They don't have much control over anything to begin with. Better for them to visualize some tangible boogeyman, like the monster under the bed, or evil trolls who live beneath storybook bridges. I know you kids would never be foolish enough to try drugs, my mother continued. But if you run across a group of dope fiends, they may force their drugs on you, chase you down, and whoosh! She jabbed her pencil in the air towards Pam for emphasis, then towards me. I jumped back in nervous reaction. The police haven't caught any of the dope fiends yet, so they're still out there. She pointed at her main source of information, the television, in its rare moment of flickering silence, disorganized towers of newsprint, and the end-table telephone, her daily link in epic half-hour conversations with her two remaining friends, Mrs. Lieberman and my Aunt Laura. If I hear anything more, I'll let you know. Until then, I want you both to stay out of the woods. I nodded first, without waiting to see Pam's response. This was before President's wife told us to just say no, before your brain sizzled sunny side up in MTV frying pans. But even then, in the post-hippie 1970s, drugs were dialed pretty high on a kid's panic meter. I was too young to grasp the concept fully, of course, and stirred my own fears into the mixture. When my mother mentioned the paraphernalia found in the woods, hypodermic syringes, rubber tubes, empty glass vials of medicine, she may have said something about medicine caps. Or maybe the dope idea was suggestive enough. My third-grade mind somehow latched onto caps, conflated it with the image of a cartoon child in the corner of a schoolroom, a pointed dunce or dope cap rising from his head. I imagined predatory older boys donning these caps as the proud symbol of their gang. They patrolled the woods behind our house, seeking new initiates. They would toss syringes like darts at your exposed arms or neck. They would force you to the ground and press their ignorance into you, lowering it like a shameful cap onto your struggling head. Ignorance was even more terrifying to me than needles. I was a slightly overweight boy, uncoordinated at sports and generally unpopular at school. To be stupid, to be unattractive and awkward and picked on and stupid was the worst fate I could imagine. Smart was all I had. And yet, I was stupid enough, later that summer, to let Aaron Lieberman and my sister talk me into visiting those woods to search for abandoned needles. Thank you.